Stay tuned and discover the place where I died. My personal paranormal experience I share today occurred when I took a 2-week vacation to the UK in 1989. I just saw and photographed the exact spot where I died. This trip in 1989 was literally, for me personally, the trip of a lifetime. During this trip, I had a number of paranormal experiences, one of which I share on this channel, and you can watch it here after you've finished this video. And then another paranormal experience I had on this same trip, I share in this other video that you can also watch on my channel. For today's true tale of the paranormal, I shared an experience I had toward the end of my trip when we were traveling to a very small little town in Wales called Goobert-on-the-Sea. Stay tuned and discover the place where I died. To set the scene, I was with a tour group of Americans. We numbered 10, and then we had our driver and our guide. So a total of 12 people, and we were on a little coach, which for Americans means a minibus. And we were traveling along the road on our way to our next stop. The theme of this tour was the real and the legendary King Arthur. I've been an Anglophile most of my life, and like my favorite stories are the Arthurian legends. I've read Le Morte d'Arthur, not once, not twice, but 3 times. I've read T.H. White's The Once and Future King twice. And of course, I've seen every movie about King Arthur that's ever been made, some of them multiple times. And so when I was getting ready to graduate with my master's degree from the University of California, Santa Barbara, my parents gave me a choice for a graduation gift. Behind curtain number 1, a used car. Behind curtain number 2, an all expenses paid trip to England to tour all the places mentioned in the King Arthur stories. Which did I choose? Talk about a no-brainer. Of course, I chose the trip. And I'm telling you, to this day, I count that decision as one of the best decisions I ever made, because this trip had everything. It had everything. It had ghosts, it had UFOs, and I actually found the very spot of land on which I died in a previous lifetime. Now, for those of you who don't know about reincarnation or don't believe in it, you may think this story is complete bullshit. I preface it with what I had to deal with in the form of nightmares for as long as I could remember. And this nightmare would occur on average about once a month. And it was always exactly the same. There was zero variation in the details of my nightmare. I have not had this nightmare since July of 1989, but I can still recall it in minute detail to this day. What occurred in the nightmare is that I am walking across a field of grass, and I have the knowledge in the dream that I have left my home, which is immediately behind me, some building I don't see in the dream because I don't turn around to look at it. And I'm walking and I don't feel quite right mentally and also physically. Now, at the time I first had this dream, that I can recall this dream all the way back to the age of 5, okay? I look down at myself and I can see I'm wearing a long white nightgown that goes down to my ankles, and it has frilly material gathered up along the ankles, and I can look down at my hands. My hands look like an adult woman's hands. And yet I'm having this nightmare as a child. And I can see I'm wearing a gown with long white sleeves, and again with frilly gathered material at the cuffs. And I'm barefoot. And so I'm walking through the grass. The grass is wet and damp. I can feel the dampness on my feet. And I'm walking toward a cliff. I can see the ocean along the horizon. And I know in my mind, in the dream, that I am very familiar with the beach I'm walking toward, but that my home is up on the cliff. So as I get to the cliff's edge, I know I'll be able to look down and see this beach. And I keep thinking in the dream, I want to see the seals. So evidently seals hung out at this beach. So I go to the cliff's edge, and as I look down, I realize how thin my fingers are, and my skin tone is extremely pale. And I don't know, maybe in this lifetime I was a blonde. That could account for it. But my wrists were also very, very thin. And I think I'd been sick a long time. I just looked a little emaciated. And I looked down, and as I looked down, I guess because physically I'm not 100%, I get this huge wave of dizziness. I lose my footing on the wet grass on the edge of that cliff, and I fall. As I fall, I'm seeing a pattern of rocks. Some on the beach, some partially submerged with the water because the tide had come in. And I'm seeing these rocks that they look like they're rushing up to meet me. And just as I'm going to hit the rocks, I wake up with a start. When I was a child, till I was about maybe 12 years old, I'd wake up screaming. Just about once a month. My parents didn't know what was going on because I'd never been to a setting like that. Now, I was raised in Waukegan, Illinois, and it's right on Lake Michigan. So, you know, by that age, by the age of 5, I'd been to the beach a number of times, but the beach there looks nothing like what I saw in my dream. It's a flat beach. We've got some sand dunes. That's about it. There aren't any cliffs there. And also my parents were extremely careful about the TV I watched. So growing up, I watched PBS and I watched the kiddie shows on WGN-TV out of Chicago. So my TV viewing was strictly supervised. There was nothing I could have seen or been exposed to that would have caused me to have this repeating nightmare. But like I said, I had it pretty much every month until the summer of 1989. And by then, I had gotten interested in reincarnation and past lives, and I'd kind of figured out on my own that, hey, this dream I always have, I bet you that's how I died in a past life, and that's me in that lifetime. But I didn't know where it was. I had no information that could help me to research that geographic area and perhaps one day find out who I was. And so, you know, I go about living my life. So then I go on this trip to England, right? And I'm having the time of my life. Oh my God, every single day of this trip. I cannot even begin to explain how amazing it was. So on this particular day, we stayed at each hotel during our tour there. 3 to 4 nights. We were there for 2 weeks. So on this particular day of the trip, we were traveling, we were in between hotels. So we had a rather long drive into Wales and this small little town called Goobert on the sea. And we were going to stay at this little hotel there called, get ready for it. Are you ready? The Cliff Hotel. I kid you not, the Cliff Hotel. Now, again, nothing occurred to me. I didn't think there was anything weird about that. And I was just like interested in seeing, Wales. I've never been to Wales before. Of course, I've never been to the UK before either. So we're driving along, and the closer we get to the hotel, I'm looking out the window and I'm thinking to myself, I suddenly realized the lay of the land, the horizon line along the hills, is beginning to look very familiar to me. And I keep looking out the windows, and I keep looking out the windows. And then I say to my friends, because now, of course, it's like 3/4 of the way through our tour, and we're all buddies. It was an awesome group of people, except for one person. But, there's always got to be that one person. Oh my gosh, that woman. Anyway, I say to my friends, hey, look at the hills around here. Does this look familiar to any of you? Like, did they film some famous movie along here? And everybody starts looking out the windows, and they're like, well, I don't know. It doesn't look like anything I've ever seen in a movie. And they're looking, and then I ask our guide and our driver, and they're like, no, as far as we know, they haven't filmed anything through here. So I'm kind of perplexed, because the closer we are getting to the Cliff Hotel, the increasing buildup of familiarity was starting to really mess with me. And it was like, I've been here before. You get to that point where you're thinking, no, this isn't from any movie I saw. I've been here. But then I'm like, no, I haven't. And I was so confused. And then around a bend in the road, we get our first glimpse of the Cliff Hotel. And I'm like, I've seen this building before, but this is the wrong color. It was like a stone that I remember seeing it as, kind of like a grayish brown stone building. And this building was painted white. And I was just like, that's totally the wrong color. And along the side, it said in dark brown lettering, the Cliff Hotel. So there was no doubt that was the hotel we were going to stay at for the next few nights. And as we walk into the hotel, I'm looking around and I'm like, this is all wrong. It just felt so wrong to me. And then I had this rising sense of anger. Like, what did they do? What did they do to this fine building? Why? So we're all checked in because, of course, our tour guide takes care of all that for us. So we're going upstairs to our rooms. And one of my friends from the group was on the stairway right behind me. And as I'm going up, I start smelling a mixture of like roses and lilacs, like it was a perfume. Very heady, strong, but yet pleasant. And then I thought, oh wow, that's really pretty. I'm thinking to myself, and I'm thinking, yeah, the roses are my favorite flower. Lilacs. I grew up in a home, my child home in Waukegan had a line of lilac trees along one side of the yard. So in the spring, their scent would fill our home, and they smelled lovely. My mother grew a bunch of roses in the front yard, and so we had that mix of the scent of roses and the scent of lilacs. I grew up with that. And I'm smelling this thinking, my first thought was, oh man, I hope nothing happened to my parents. Because you hear those stories, someone dies and suddenly a loved one is smelling their favorite perfume or something. And so, I made a note to myself, as soon as I dumped my stuff in the room, it was morning time. I said, I have to wait a few hours to call my parents to check on them because there's a 6-hour time difference between the UK and the Chicago area. So the UK is 6 hours ahead. And since it was morning, my parents would have still been sleeping. And, I didn't want to call home and scare them half to death. So I waited a few hours to make that phone call. Well, meanwhile, on the stairway, smelling this gorgeous scent, I turn around to my friend and I said, do you smell that? And she says, yeah. She goes, it's beautiful. I thought it was you. And I'm like, no, it's not me. And she says, oh, a woman must have, and we're still going up the stairs. And she said, a woman must have just walked through here wearing it. And I'm like, yeah, I guess so, you know, because it was really a heavy scent. Like it was still in there. Like this woman should have been like right there in front of me. There was nothing there. So I go into my room. She has a room next door to me. She's the only other person in the group who's traveling alone like I am. Everyone else were in pairs. So we go in our single rooms, and all of our other friends are like in the opposite wing where they have double rooms, you know. So I go in my room and I go to the window and I look out. And what's out there? The view of the ocean. And then the strangest thought occurred to me. I need to go see the seals. It just popped into my head out of nowhere. And I'm going, seals? And I'm an artist, so when I hear or think of the word seals, I don't think of the animal seal. I think of a wax seal that you would use to seal a fancy envelope, you know? And so I'm thinking, seals? Why would I want to go see wax seals? And what would wax seals be doing out there, you know, by the ocean? And I'm like, this makes no sense. And as I'm going down the stairs, I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking, oh, seals, the animal. Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm like, yeah, I would like to go see the seals. But then I wondered, do they even have them here? I had no idea. So we go downstairs and we're going to tour the grounds, just walk around. We had a free morning. We were going to go somewhere else later that afternoon. So I go out there and I'm by myself and I'm walking along and I've got my camera and I'm taking pictures of the landscape to look at it later to try to match it up against all these King Arthur movies I've seen, because I'm still convinced there was a movie filmed here like Excalibur or something, you know, and I'm like, that's got to be the explanation, right? So I get really close to the cliff edge and I look down as I'm walking. And the memory of my nightmare, which is, you know, embedded into my brain by this time, you know, I started having that nightmare when I was 5. And then on my vacation, I was 22 years old. I'm thinking, oh my God, this looks scarily familiar. And then I look out at the horizon and I'm like, no way, this cannot be the place. Now, in my dream, there's the grass goes right to the cliff edge, and then there's the cliff. No warning, there's a cliff coming. The grass goes totally to the edge. And I'm thinking to myself, in order to see if there's any seals on the beach down there, you literally do have to get right up to the cliff's edge and look over, okay? Because as you get nearer the cliff's edge, the grass gets taller. So by this time, the grass was like, I don't know, probably about 2 or 3 inches past my ankles. So it makes it difficult to see exactly where that edge is. I knew not to get too close. So as I started to lean over, all of a sudden I hear screaming behind me. Never, stop. And I'm hearing this running, and I turn around to see my two of my friends that we stayed in contact with years and years after the tour, come running towards me, and her husband grabs me, pulls me away from the cliff's edge, and he's like, what do you think you're doing? I said, I just wanted to see if there were any seals down on the beach. He goes, don't you realize you could have slipped on the grass here? And then it hit me. Oh my God, the lay of the land, the way I felt about the building striking me as being the wrong color. Me wanting to do something odd like go see if there are seals on the beach. This was the setting of my nightmare. But there was only one way I could prove it to myself. And I remember just gasping for breath, and I was like grabbing my chest. I felt like I was going to have a heart attack. My heart was pounding out of my chest. And they're like, okay, we know you're scared. Just calm down. You're okay now. We got you. You know, nothing's going to happen. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. And as soon as I was able to calm down, I told them about my nightmare, and they're all just like. And then her husband says to me, I'm going to hold on to you My wife will hold on to me. His wife weighed like 200 pounds, okay? And he himself was very thin. And he says, we're going to have you take a look over that edge and snap a picture with your camera. I'm like, awesome. And so we do that, right? And as I look over, what do I see? Do I see seals? No. But what I see stunned me to my core. Now, if you've been watching this channel for a while, you know I've seen a lot of weird shit, and I have experienced a lot of bizarre things. You would think after a certain amount of time, your psyche gets used to it. No, that doesn't happen. I can still get totally freaked out over stuff that happens to me. Bizarre things that I see or hear or sense, whatever. But that day, looking down from the cliff's edge at that rocky beach, what I saw was the exact same pattern of rocks I have seen once a month in my nightmares from the age of at least 5 until I was 22 years old. That's 17 years. And I'm looking down, you know, at my camera. It's a 35 millimeter camera. It's hanging around my neck. And my friend's over there, did you snap your picture yet? I'm like, huh? What? Oh. And I bring it up, I start taking some pictures. And then they pulled me back. And they said, well, what happened? And they looked at me and they go, man, you need to go sit down. And they pulled me further, a few feet further inland from the cliff's edge, and they sat me right down there in the grass. And they said I was as white as paper. I've never seen myself turn pale, so I don't know what that looks like. I'm Hispanic, you know, Mexican American. So to get one of us to turn white as paper, that's pretty intense. And so they sat me down, they, you know, tried to calm me down. They said, what did you see? And I said to them, I just saw and photographed the exact spot where I died. And they were like, no. And I'm like, it's the same pattern of rocks, hand to God, same pattern. When I got home and got my photographs developed, all 22 rolls of them, yeah, 22 rolls of pictures. That picture, I blew up into an 8x10 and I framed it. And I set it in my bookcase in my college apartment, and I would tell people, yeah, you see this here? That's the spot where I died. And they'd be like, what? And then I would tell them the story and freak out everybody I ever met in grad school from that point on. So it was a great conversation piece. But Goobert on the Sea, yes, I went and stood in the exact spot where I had died in a previous lifetime. Now, no one at the hotel could tell me who I may have been, but they said there was a rumor that a woman had fallen to her death along the cliffs there, but it was never substantiated. So there you go. Was I that woman? I believe I was. After that trip, when I got home, I never once had that nightmare again. Not anywhere close. I never once had to face those rocks rushing up to meet my face. I never again woke up screaming. And I believe it's because when I went and stood on the exact same spot where I died, my soul was healed from that karmic trauma it had carried forward into my current lifetime. I firmly believe that. So this has been the place where I died. If you've enjoyed this story, I ask that you please like the video, subscribe to my channel. I appreciate you all so much. And until next time, I am Neferkefri, your hostess with the ghostess, and you've been watching True Tales of the Paranormal. And that's my Camp Blue Star.